Hello, friend. This is Legal Design Thinking in Real Life, a weekly live series from Lawyers Design School. And really great to have you all with us. I'm your host, Annele Korhonen, and I'm the founder of Lawyers Design School. I'm here today with Robert de Rooy, who's doing trailblazing work with comic contracts, aka illustrated contracts. And today we'll be kind of challenging our thoughts on what's possible with contracts and how we can ensure better outcomes for underserved people. Welcome, Robert, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. And welcome to everyone who's looking in or listening in.
Yes. Where are you joining from?
I'm in Cape Town, South Africa. The same time zone as Finland, but on the other pole.
Yeah, the sun is shining.
The sun is shining. It's 30 degrees. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's get going. I'd like to start with your story. What's your own background?
So my background is law. I'm a practicing attorney, and I've practiced commercial law in South Africa, including litigation, etc., since 1996. And so, yeah, that's kind of my main profession. And But yeah, living in South Africa, you are confronted with lots of inequality and lots of problems, and also as a lawyer, and as a lot of lawyers know, especially some of our products as lawyers are not very good. They're not very user friendly. So obviously, there's quite a few legal processes that are not very user friendly, but specifically deal a lot with contracts, and I think contracts are not user friendly. And as a law profession of lawyers, I think we have a responsibility to make sure that that what we're offering the public should be user friendly. And so that was part of my journey and discovery into say, okay, well, what does a good contract look like? When is a contract a good contract? And I started exploring different metrics for what a good contract is. And in that process, I came across the work of Helena Harpio and Tom Barton and Gerlinda Berger-Walliser and Colette Brunswick, etc. People that have been exploring the use of visualization in contracts, and that really spoke to me because it's the visualization and makes contracts more accessible. But what I also really liked about that approach, that kind of proactive approach to the contracts, was that the purpose of the contract was put front and center. So it's how do we achieve the success of this relationship? How do we make this artifact, which is a contract, support the how does it support the purpose that the people have in mind when they enter into agreements? And so that really spoke to me. And then bringing that idea back into my context here in South Africa, and Africa in general, where was okay, well, what does a good contract look like for people that are low literate, or vulnerable? And obviously I could leverage off this idea of visualization because visuals are easy to understand even if you're not literate. And so that kind of then put me on the path of experimenting with different clauses to see, can one convert contractual clauses into visuals? Can you represent a clause? And then I experimented with a couple of clauses, and then eventually eventually put together a whole contract, in a visual contract, and had one of my kind of legal practice clients was liked the idea and wanted to participate, and so we prepared that for him, and that became the the first comic contract.
That's amazing. So you first had your own law practice, and then you started exploring this. So what is creative contracts then?
Yeah, so I still practice law. Creative contracts is my my passion. It's a separate business with some partners, but I'm still in the process of growing it, but not simply just growing the kind of the business, but trying to grow the idea of comic contracts. I see it as a social enterprise. We are focused on trying to advocate for better contracts, especially for vulnerable people. And so we try to create as many examples as we can to show people that it's possible. And people can look at our work and maybe get some inspiration for doing something similar, doing it better. We simply we select the projects that we do. We prefer doing a new project than doing more of an existing project, because we find that, for example, even if we've done a contract for a mandarin picker, if it's a blueberry farmer, he wants to see a blueberry contract before he thinks it's actually possible. So and so we're trying to extend the suite of possible visual contracts that one can do, and we've done a lot now. So there's a lot of examples of what can be done in that space. But in the meantime, I still practice law because that's still paying the bills. Yeah.
I'm curious to know what has been the response, or originally when you started to explore these comic contracts. Was it all positive, or did you get any hesitant feedback from anyone? Is it really possible to use comics in contracts?
Yes, I think initially, or for a long time, the biggest hurdle was my own worries. Being a lawyer, I was obsessed with this idea of, can this be legally binding? And I think it can, but is there something I'm not seeing? And I was delving into all sorts of rabbit holes to try and basically defend my case, if you will, that if I go public with the idea of a comic contract and then get attacked by my colleagues, with some clever argument as to why what I'm doing is completely, impossible and worthless. I was continuously trying to prepare my case. I went as far as like hiring, paying former judges and senior lawyers to give me written opinions,
poke holes to your own case.
Yes, and to come up with to help me with defending the concept. So I spent a lot of time and money just doing that. And then, but since the idea spread, and also, with, how should I say, the support and like-minded support of similar work that's also been done from, like, the University of Western Australia, Professor Camilla Bos Anderson. There's a law professor, and she's also doing this, and so that gave me a lot of confidence, and I think it's also helping legitimizing the idea, and etc. I had one or two of my colleagues who, I was like interviewed on a local radio station at some point, and then quite grumpy old colleague basically wrote a piece in the newspaper saying this can never work. But I mean, he hadn't even seen it. He just heard this on the radio. So, but yeah, 99% of the reaction has been very encouraging. Very, very, welcome. Yeah.
There's always someone to there will always be naysayers, so we can't really get rid of them.
It's true, but it's not. I think it's healthy to how should I say, it's good when people challenge your thinking. You know, it's otherwise, you know, everyone just agrees and you're kind of going along. You never really testing it, you know, whether you're right or not. So I don't like I don't mind if someone asks challenging questions, because it also forces me to think and learn and deal with it, you know. Yeah.
That's so true. There's one question in the chat. Have you already had to enforce any comic contracts before court? And what is, if so, can you tell us about the experience? Has it been
Yeah.
tested in court?
No, it's never been tested in court. And I think there's a couple of reasons for it. The first reason is that you know, you know, it's an agreement that goes out of its way to be extremely clear about what it says. So I think very few people, you know, that engage with our agreements are going to go to court about, you know, some kind of dispute about the meaning of a particular clause. I just don't think it's the kind of population, if you will, where that is likely to happen. You know, and we try and be as clear as possible, you know, so that there is no real misunderstanding. But obviously that in itself isn't evidence that, you know, we can't, at some point someone might decide to challenge it. Yeah, but no, the short answer is it hasn't been challenged in any court of law. And even if someone would, you know, that wouldn't really mean anything, in the sense that it would be a decision in respect of that particular contract in that particular jurisdiction. It doesn't invalidate the concept of a visual contract. The same way challenging a text agreement in court would invalidate all text agreements everywhere in the world. You know, it would mean, you know, we probably made a mistake, you know, or we weren't clear enough, or, you know, something was left out. You know, that it would be a defect of that particular contract. It doesn't invalidate the idea that you can very appropriately capture the content of a contract with visuals, specifically appropriate to the audience that you're trying to address. You know, as I said, a lot of our work is addressed to people of low literacy, people that would struggle to contracts. Yeah.
That's a very good point, that it wouldn't invalidate the whole concept, and it would be actually really interesting to test the one of the contracts in court, just to learn what would be the areas to improve, to make it even clearer for the court process as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Although even on the flip side, even if you go to court and you test that particular one, you only have a view on that particular contract, right? You could apply the learnings from that onto other contracts, but it wouldn't kind of extend its blessing over all contracts as a solution. But yeah, maybe I thought
it would be great to see an example, practical example.
Yeah, maybe let me just quickly show
yes.
I'll quickly present here. I'll share the screen. Okay, so I'm just going to flip through a contract, a typical contract. So this was the Clement Gold contract. This is the first one we did, and it's for a fruit pickers, and they pick mandarins, specifically Clement Gold mandarins. It's a Nadorkot variety. Yeah, and so here's the. So like a normal contract, you identify the parties to the contract. So the comic contract, your parties are represented by the characters. So this is a worker and this is the employer character. Just as an interesting aside, this was the very first one we did. The first thing that a lot of the pickers, who happen to be women, told me is that why is the picker not represented by a woman? And so the very next contract we did, we made sure that the pickers were represented by women as well. Anyway, it was nice because it showed that they engaged with the contract. And then we've got this other character here who's like the lawyer, so who brings a legal perspective to some of the clauses, when there's a reference to a specific law or regulation. So we also try to follow more or less a theme. We try to show here, we're trying to follow a chronological theme. If I just flip back, so you identify yourself, you arrive at the farm, there's an induction, then there's a probation, then there's a description of the job. So some of the stuff is quite specific. So there's a difference between select picking and strip picking. This is something that the workers understand. That is shown here. Oops, I went too fast. So there's the identification of the job, and there's an explanation as to how the job is paid, how the disciplinary procedure works, and whatever deductions are made, hours of work is shown. Sorry, this thing is quite
it's fast.
sensitive. Yes. What happens if you stay away from work? The duration of appointment. So these are seasonal workers. There's a reference to the code of conduct, and then there's the signature page. And then if there's any specific changes, we just allow for those changes. So that's quite shortly an example. So that was our very first one. We find that once we start with this, employers often try to add things, regarding hygiene, grievance procedures, etc., because it's a nice medium. And so instead of making contracts shorter and shorter, people like to make our contracts longer and longer because there's a lot of things that they would like to get across when they contract with workers.
Well, what I'd like to learn more about the project behind that particular example. What was the project like? Who were involved, and what was your role in it? And did you have someone to illustrate those
Yes.
Characters? And
yes, yeah. So one of the partners in Creative Contracts is a company called Gincom, and there's about 40 people working there: illustrators, designers, traffic managers. So at the time when I did this, I was very much supported by their processes which they had in place. So typically what happens is, from a process, and what we've done since then, is when we do a contract, we normally ask the client to provide us with their text agreement that they're currently using. We look at that. We try and clean it up, because often no one's really paid much attention to it. And we just try and make sure, because to kind of illustrate stuff that are not strictly necessary is expensive. So we really make sure that the contract is reduced to the essentials. And then we script it. So I've got a writer and Linka Maritz, and she scripts the contract. So we sit together, we think about how we would represent stuff, and she describes that in text, with the action, with any specific text that we might want to include. And so we write up this whole script of the comic contract, and that's then given to the illustrators, who then start who basically draw this thing. Normally that process starts in parallel by developing a cast of characters, so that we get the look and feel right of each character, because these pictures have to resonate with the users, with the audience. And so that's a parallel process where we make sure we get the cast of characters right. In the meantime, we look at the rough drawings, the scamps. If everyone's happy with this, we sit with the customer, the client. Is everyone happy? And then we go to a process called inks, fine line drawings, much more detailed. Everyone happy? Okay, then we color it, and then lastly, it's shading. When we get to the stage of coloring, then we normally we encourage our clients to take that to a sample group of users, so that they can give us feedback. because we make some assumptions, and it's dangerous. Assumptions are dangerous, so we ask for feedback, and then we incorporate that feedback into our final product. And once that's ready, then we also we try to make it available in the different languages like South Africa. We have 11 official languages. On some farms, people speak 3 to 4, 5 different languages, and so we make it available in that. And then, if it's a male and female group of users, we try to have a version of both. So that's more or less the process that we follow in creating the material.
Oh, that's super interesting to hear. Thanks for sharing. There's actually a question in the chat. How easy or difficult is it to translate traditional contract to comic contracts? It sounds like there are at least a lot of, or many different steps to it.
Yes, I think the steps is important. It's because it's especially if you having to produce stuff for paying customers, right? Because it is a process. That process has to slot in amongst other products that are also being developed for people, because you're employing people. They you have to, so the process is critical, and there are and you've got people that the illustrator does what the illustrator does. You've got a junior designer, you've got a senior designer. So everyone is focused on their role. But when it comes to some of the creative, the translation, we try and do it as a kind of a transdisciplinary team, because the illustrator's view on how to represent something is as valid as mine, as a lawyer. We all have our imaginations. We all have, I can't draw, so I've got to kind of say what I see in my mind, and then Linka writes it down, for example. But we can all participate, and we try and do that. We try and get as many perspectives on a clause as possible, and make sure that it also resonates with the user. So one thing I forgot to mention earlier is we also, obviously, if we cannot access the site or the farm or the location ourselves, if it's, for example, somewhere in West Africa or in Thailand, then we ask the client to send us photos so that we get an idea of the kind of look and feel that we have to represent in those pictures. Then as far as the legal aspect is concerned, in terms of translating, it's actually not that difficult. Once you sit down and you say, okay, well, how do we represent a jurisdiction clause, for example? You use a map. You use the map of the jurisdiction, and you show the character with the symbol of law, and then you have, okay, that's our jurisdiction. Brazil, or is it a province, or depending on how your jurisdictions are divided up. Making changes, But to add to that, we do try and focus our contracts when we say, okay, what is essential here, on what people need to do to have that successful outcome. So that we try and stay focused on that proactive contracting target, so we privilege the kind of clauses that would guide the users on what to do to achieve success. We don't spend 80% of the document on what who's going to give, what's going to give you a possible advantage if you have to go to court. And those type of clauses are often practical, right? You've got to pick so many things, and you're going to get paid, and you've got to arrive at this place and that time. So those are practical clauses that we that are easier to illustrate. And this is not something that I think is suitable for kind of a merger and acquisition kind of contract. So we don't have to describe like 5-page preemptive clauses. But it's you can do it. It's just going to be expensive.
There's actually one question about this also in the chat. How do you see the applicability of visual contracts in commercial agreements for sales, for example? Have you any examples of that or experience?
I think it has a lot of use in commercial agreements because, for example, and it's already being done, right? Stefania Passera uses, for example, uses visualization, and Rob Waller as well in commercial agreements. Incoterms. When does your liability start and stop? If it gets off the ship or on the ship. Those things are so transparent. If you've seen it once, you're not going to forget who's responsible. Where you can read the same clause 5 times and you walk away, and 3 days later you've got to look at it again because you can't remember, right? So it's very useful. You just have to find the balance between the amount of text and the amount of visuals. So our work the comic work is more focused on low literate people. If you're doing commercial agreements, you've got this luxury of being able to combine maybe a bit more text and together with the visuals. But the visuals, apart from explaining things and making it clear, they also engage your attention, right? So people are more likely to actually read these agreements, and it's not going to be as painful as it currently is. So I think it's very useful. We've even had to do a contract, not a contract, but a policy for a business school for MBA students to just understand when to submit their assignments, or if they can't submit it on time, what steps they have to follow. So even highly literate people benefit from someone making the effort to just make it easier to understand, and then you've got less problems and everyone's happy.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and it's just taking exactly what you said, that you have to understand what is the core of the contract and then leave everything else out to make it really clear, because we add and add and add so many things that are not necessarily
Yes.
needed.
And that's sometimes just a matter of being brave, right?
Yes.
You got to it takes just a touch of bravery to say, you know what, this clause might give me an advantage in this slight chance of that this might happen, but I'm not going to clutter this. I'm not going to reduce the impact and the clarity of what I'm trying to do. But and yeah, so I think clients and paying customers and companies, and lawyers, I would challenge us to be more brave about just not trying to stuff these things full of every conceivable defensive advantage.
Yes. Yes.
That, yeah, we should learn the difference between a possibility and a probability.
That's a perfect way to put it. But what would you like to say to a lawyer who's working with contracts and is interested in starting to explore using comics or images? How can one get started with this?
Yeah, I would say definitely, there's a rich body of articles and work that's developed around this, in the space of legal design, and I think there's a lot of stuff. The way I was inspired by Helena's articles, for example, I think there's a lot of stuff around now which is very inspiring. There's a lot of good work happening in this space, and I think take the chance. I'm not an artist. I'm not creative. I can't draw, but work with people that can, and that in itself for a lawyer is probably
It's mind blowing sometimes.
yeah, and listen to other people, and their perspectives. Yeah, and stay and find something that's meaningful. You're not gonna get rich from this, but if you have a purpose, if you find what you're doing, you're producing a contract that, or a document, or a policy, or that people are actually going to enjoy using. That's a much better way to spend your time, creating stuff that people like or that serves their purpose positively, than creating stuff that you can bill for, but people would rather prefer chewing cardboard than read your stuff. It's kind of, yeah. So I would say look around, find something that can be done better, and draw on resources and go for it. It's very rewarding. I find a lot of meaning in this, and keeps me going. And I'm proud of what we do, so it's nice. I wasn't always proud of the work I was doing as a lawyer.
Oh, that's so important. That's so important to talk about the purpose and meaning of the meaning of it also. It's really kind of on personal level, it's also really important to think about these things and try start to explore.
Yeah.
But hey, before we close this episode, what are you currently working on, and where can people learn more about you and your work?
So what we're currently working on is a Comic Contracts 2.0, so the digital version of the comic contract, where we take the comic contract and we add a audio layer. So you describe the contract verbally in a digital format, and then we combine. We also at the same time use a zooming and panning function to focus people's attention on the relevant panels as they're being discussed. Because I think we believe that's making it more easier for people to understand. And there's, especially for low literate people, vulnerable people, migrants, to be addressed about something like this in your mother tongue is quite it engages people quite strongly, sometimes even more than the visuals. And so that's our next that's the project that we more or less have completed now, and hoping to start implementing to make it also making it easier to distribute and hopefully to reach more people. So that's kind of what we're busy with now. And if anyone wants to reach us, I think you can phone me, email me. My details are on the website, creativecontracts.com. If you want advice, if anyone has questions, I'm happy to share. So just let me know.
Oh, that's great. And there are plenty of more examples if people are interested in seeing available. So please explore. But hey, thank you so much for taking the time to join today, and thank you for everybody for joining us here and listening and watching. And have a great day, everybody. This is it for today. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.